All right, good morning. It's another beautiful day. As far as we're concerned here in Lagos, it's a rainy day for us. But whatever it is, we'll celebrate as it comes. It's another time for us to talk about business, to talk about finance, to talk about every economic issues across the whole world. This is Early Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. As usual, we are set to give you the best of programming, the best of production. Today is going to be another interesting edition. We're going to have interesting conversation around the energy sector. But before we do that, Vivian is standing by to take us around the world when it comes to news update. Vivian, good morning. How are you today?
Oh, I'm very well. Good morning, Femi, and good morning to you, and welcome to the morning news update on Souk News. I am Vivian Oguche. From boardrooms to breakthroughs, we've got your daily dose of economic insights, innovation, and investment opportunities. And this will begin right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, President Bola Tinubu has approved the immediate payment of life insurance benefits to the families of deceased soldiers. Now, this action follows his directive to the armed forces and other security agencies to address the country's ongoing security challenges. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja, made these announcements during the COS's Combined Second and Third Quarter Conference 2023 in Abuja. He explained that the government's group life assurance scheme was designed to provide support to the families of fallen heroes by paying insurance premiums. However, there was a backlog of unpaid claims from 2012 to 2022, which the federal government has now undertaken to settle, providing much-needed relief to the affected families. Additionally, Lieutenant General Lagbaja emphasized the continued prioritization of troops' welfare and the establishment of special forces units to combat criminal activities across the country. These units, staffed with specially trained personnel, have achieved remarkable success in intelligence-led operations and the utilization of specialized equipment. Now, Nigeria's Minister of Transportation, Senator Saidu Alkali, has inaugurated the first cargo movement on the Lagos-Ibadan rail corridor during his official tour to the state. In a historic moment, 3 coaches, each comprising 30 wagons, were loaded to kick off the inaugural freight movement. The Nigerian Railway Corporation, NRC, has outlined plans to initiate these coach services with 3 coaches per day, with the potential to increase capacity. This development is a crucial step in alleviating congestion at the Apapa port, which handled the majority of Nigeria's imports and exports, accounting for 92.28% of exports and 60.77% of imports in the first quarter of 2022. Now, the federal government, through the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, has delisted 37 more illegal loan apps, marking a significant step in curbing unauthorized lending activities. This move brings the total number of fully approved loan apps to 164, an increase from the previous count of 154. However, the number of loan apps with conditional approval decreased from 38 to 38 from 40, while the number of apps on the Commission's watch list rose from 56 from the previous 20. Now, the FCCPC had previously taken measures to address this issue, permanently delisting and initiating the removal process for at least 2 loan apps from the Google Play Store for harassing Nigerian users. In the meantime, a group of education experts has partnered with the Nigerian Governors Forum, NGF, to improve education in Nigeria. And the partnership aims to catalyze transformational reforms and policies in the sector. According to the Director General of the NGF, Asishana Okauru, New Globe will provide its expertise in education to the NGF The partnership between New Globe and the NGF will focus on improving the quality of teaching, provide more learning resources to students, and make education more accessible to all children, regardless of their background. According to the Group Managing Director of New Globe, Akin Olusoji Akinyele, the collaboration will elevate the education sector to a position of utmost importance, recognizing it as a critical sector essential for Nigerians' future prosperity. Now, a public relations and policy advisory firm has partnered with the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPSS, to bolster strategic communication, policy advocacy, and research initiatives. The partnership was announced in Abuja when the Director General of NIPSS, Professor Ayo Omotayo, led a management delegation of the Institute to visit the former Minister of Information and Culture and managing partner of Breed Custard, Lai Mohammed. According to Omotayo, NIPSS serves as a prominent policy think tank dedicated to national development through effective policy making, while Breed Custard is at the forefront of strategic policy advisory and corporate diplomacy in Nigeria, uniting former diplomats, ex-ministers, and seasoned corporate diplomacy experts. Well, over now to Borno State, where Governor Babangana Zulum has unveiled a new fleet of 70 buses for metro transport in Maiduguri to alleviate the burden of commuting for both government employees and the general public. The new fleet of buses comprises standard-sized buses and larger buses to accommodate a greater number of passengers and is equipped with modern amenities, including air conditioning facilities and comfortable seating arrangements to ensure a pleasant commuting experience. Governor Zulum noted that this second phase of the intervention in the transport sector is to alleviate suffering due to the removal of fuel subsidy, adding that 30 out of the total 70 buses will be dedicated to conveying civil servants to their places of work from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and return 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. from Mondays to Fridays. Well, still in Borno State, the United Nations UN has promised to partner with the state government and the Northeast Development Commission, NEDC, to resettle and address the challenges of 2.2 million internally displaced persons, IDPs, in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states. The UN delegation, led by Assistant Secretary General Robert Piper, visited the NEDC headquarters in Maiduguri to learn more about the state's response to the humanitarian crisis. Piper said that the UN is committed to supporting the state government's efforts to resettle and reintegrate the IDPs. He stressed that the solution to displacement requires long-term investment in infrastructure, health facilities, and education. Piper also said that the UN will work with the NEDC to develop a plan to resettle the IDPs and rebuild their communities. Let's take you to Zimbabwe now, where President Emerson Mnangagwa has appointed his son David Mnangagwa as the Deputy Finance Minister under the Parliament's youth quota and retained Thuli Nkube as the Finance Minister. This decision has faced criticism as Zimbabwe grapples with issues like unemployment, high inflation, and a depreciating local currency, while the president faces pressure to revitalize the economy. According to reports, the decision to retain Nkube and bring his son into the cabinet indicates the president's determination to address economic issues and bolster the youth's development or involvement in government. The economy has faced difficulties in attracting foreign investment and stabilizing its currency. And in Morocco, the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, IFRC, have raised 100 million Swiss francs CHF to provide assistance to the earthquake victims following the devastating 6.8 magnitude earthquake in the high Atlas Mountains in Morocco. According to the Global Director for Operations at IFRC, Caroline Holt, IFRC has already approved 1 million CHF in funding from its Disaster Response Emergency Fund immediately after the earthquake to support the Moroccan Red Crescent in delivering immediate relief. He said the aftermath of such natural disasters requires sustained assistance and solidarity for the affected population over the coming weeks and months. The earthquake in Morocco is the deadliest in over 6 decades. And now to the Middle East. In a bid to increase engagement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, an Israeli delegation has participated in a meeting held by the United Nations Cultural Agency, UNESCO, in Riyadh. During the 45th session of UNESCO's World Heritage Committee, 3 Israeli officials were observed occupying Israel's designated seats at the event. It was reported that the delegation comprised the Deputy Director General for International Organizations from the Israeli Foreign Ministry, as well as the Ambassador to International Organizations in Paris. Furthermore, representatives from Israel's Education Ministry and the chair of Israel's Antiquities Authority were also present at the gathering. Now, public appearances of Israeli officials in Saudi Arabia have been rare due to the country's Muslim majority population and its significance as the location of Islam's holiest sites. Now we'll go on a short break. When we come back, we'll take more stories. Stay with us. You're welcome back. We move straight to Russia, where the Reserve Bank of India, RBI, has introduced revised guidelines for the investment portfolio of commercial banks, and it's set to take effect from the 1st of April 2024. This move is geared towards enhancing transparency and to streamline the classification and valuation processes for banks' investment portfolios. Now, according to reports, these guidelines will enhance prudent risk management practices and foster stability and accountability among commercial banks, required banks to reclassify their investment into 3 distinct categories in the upcoming financial year, which are available for sale AFS, held to maturity HTM, and a newly introduced category known as fair value through profit and loss FVTPL. Furthermore, the existing held for training HFT category will transition to being a subcategory of the FVTPL. Now, by segregating investments into these 3 categories, the RBI seeks to provide a clearer picture of how banks manage and assess the risk associated with their investment holdings. Well, still in Russia, Russian companies have decided to halt their practice of offering discounted fertilizers like diammonium phosphate to India, which had made them the country's largest suppliers in the previous year. Instead, they are now pricing their fertilizers at market rates, signaling a shift in global supply dynamics. The change could lead to increased import costs and subsidy burdens for India, especially as global fertilizer prices continue to rise, partly due to China, a major exporter, limiting its overseas sales. This decision may have implications for India's fertilizer sector, potentially affecting its subsidy programs and overall import costs. Particularly in the context of rising global fertilizer prices, this development underscores the dynamic nature of global fertilizer markets and their impact on the agricultural and economic landscape in various countries, including India. Well, still talking Russia, the Reserve Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India, RBI, is actively collaborating with financial institutions to introduce innovative features to promote the adoption of the central bank digital currency, CBDC, commonly referred to as the e-rupee. Retail CBDC transactions are currently averaging around 18,000 per day, falling short of the RBI's target of 1 million daily transactions by the end of 2023. Now, to boost usage, the RBI is exploring various enhancements, including enabling offline digital rupee transactions and integrating the e-rupee with India's popular unified payments interface. And the proposed features aim to make digital rupee transactions more convenient and accessible for users with offline functionality, ensuring transactions can occur even without an active internet connection. And now the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, is set to make recommendations regarding the distribution of updated COVID-19 shots developed by vaccine manufacturers for this year's vaccination campaign. According to the CDC's director, Mandy Cohen, this approach aims to align COVID vaccines more closely with the currently circulating variant of the virus, similar to the annual design of flu shots, and is expected to approve the recommendations, allowing Americans to receive these updated vaccines. The updated shots are designed to target the XBB 1.5 variant of the virus, as requested by the FDA, and it is expected that they will offer improved cross-protection against the current Omicron variants compared to the previous bivalent boosters. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom's opposition Labour Party has unveiled its plan to retract the recently introduced Strikes Minimum Service Levels Act, which limits workers' rights to strike should the party win the upcoming election anticipated next year. Deputy Leader Angela Arena, who revealed this, noted that the decision reflects the party's dedication to enhance employee protection, and this will be done within the first 100 days of taking power. The Strikes Act, which was passed by the Conservative government in July, aims to strike a balance between the right to strike and the public's need for continued access to essential services amid disruptions caused by industrial action in recent years. Now, this legislation requires workers in critical sectors like rail, ambulance, and fire services to maintain minimum service levels during strikes. And in order to provide global broadband service from SpaceX, Telesat, a Canadian satellite company, has announced a strategic agreement with SpaceX to launch its low Earth orbit LEO satellites starting in 2026. Telesat's LEO constellation, known as Lightspeed, operates much closer to Earth compared to traditional satellites, enabling quicker data transmission and reception, especially in remote regions. According to Telesat CEO Dan Goldberg, the agreement marks a significant step forward in the pursuit of deploying Lightspeed. SpaceX was selected due to its compelling combination of cost-effectiveness, performance, reliability, and schedule consistency. The contract encompasses 14 launches, with each Falcon 9 rocket carrying up to 18 satellites into orbit, and will provide global broadband services, albeit 3 years later than initially planned. Finally, Apple has held its annual product launch titled Wanderlust event at the Steve Jobs Theater at Apple Park in Cupertino, California. The highlight of the event was the unveiling of the new iPhone 15 Pro, which features a new charging port to comply with European Union laws, a 48MP periscope camera and focus, an updated processor, a 1-gram reduction in weight, and up to 2 terabytes of storage, and is expected to go on sale on the 22nd of September. The prices of the new iPhone models have also been announced. The cheapest price for the standard iPhone 15 is priced at $999 US, and the most expensive will cost a staggering $1,800. Now, other products announced at the event include a new Apple Watch, which has a larger display and new health focus, a new AirPods, and new software updates for iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and watchOS. Well, it's a wrap for now. Early Exchange continues. Stay with us.
It's early exchange, and it's time for us to review news headlines, business headline trending across the whole world. And as usual, I have my company. I have Ida Hoser, our usual special guest who does the best of analysis as far as I know. Glad to have you join us this morning, Ida Hoser.
Femi, good morning. Esteemed viewers, good morning. Vivian,
Good morning.
remain loyal.
You look good as usual.
As usual.
You make me feel I'm before the dean of my faculty.
Oh my
okay.
gosh.
So that's good. Vivian, glad to have you as well.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
So let's set the ball rolling now. The President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has approved the immediate payment of life insurance benefits to the families of deceased soldiers. The action follows its directive to the armed forces and other security agencies to address the country's ongoing security challenges. We've had this challenge over the years where you have fallen heroes, those who have served the nation in their own interest and in the interest of the nation. They've done the best to serve the nation, but you just discover that their benefits are not being paid. This one, we're looking at insurance benefits for people of that class. It's something that should be of importance. But unfortunately, you have that situation over the years where they are being neglected, talking about their welfare, and after they've gone, their families are being neglected. But yesterday, President Tinubu approved the payment of life insurance benefits for the family of these deceased soldiers. Yesterday, we talked about the leadership style of President Tinubu. Idauza, what's your reaction to this?
Well, again, we want to say thank you to Mr. President. And I think over time, as a nation, we have dealt handling more of symptoms than looking at the root causes of issues. Some time ago, when I was speaking with some people in Jos, and that was around 2004, public servants, and we're talking about issues of corruption in public service. And one young man said, you see, my father served this nation all his years and has nothing to show for service. So why do you want me to live like my father? Now, this speaks to the issues and the challenge that we see, not just in the security agencies, but even in the core civil service, that people are not sure of life after service. Now, if I want to serve this nation, lay my life down to ensure I defend the territorial integrity of our state and ensure that there's internal peace and cohesion, and then I die in the course of service, my children are thrown out the barracks, so why will I take that risk? And this is why you saw a lot of soldiers had to run away from the front line during the heydays of the Boko Haram, because they are not sure that putting their life on the line, their children will be looked after. And I think it's a good start for the president. For me, really, I would recommend that there should be a comprehensive package. It may not be in terms of how much you are paid, but in terms of the security you get, whether for yourself or your family, if the eventuality happens. And I think this is where we must begin to speak to a whole lot of issues. Now, what are we talking about? These are not supposed to be, these are things that are supposed to be just done, and the risk is shifted to a third party, the insurer. That the government can put a life insurance for every soldier, every policeman, every DSS officer, and then, of course, they are sure that when anything happens to them, their family will not be neglected, as I rightly said. And when you do a lot of this, a whole lot of motivations will come to the military officers, and they will be ready to lay down their life to fight and defend the nation. I think this is the right thing to do. We need to do more. Just apart from life insurance, we also need to do mortgages for them, so that, of course, even when they are done with service, they will have a house to retire to. Now, these will reduce the pillaging of the nation's resources. It will reduce low morale in the service, and people will have enough energy to really defend the cause of his land.
Yeah, but apart from that, I think it's even an incentive to the younger ones to want to come be part
Oh,
of the
yes.
nation's
Oh, yes.
security
Oh,
architecture. Now, notice how this report is framed. That the president made a directive to the armed forces after he talked about beefing up the nation's security.
Yeah.
So this is very strategic, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is meant to, he's saying, see, look, I'm ready to take care of you.
Yeah.
Now take care of the nation. Yeah. This works, right?
It will work.
Yeah, so, but does it stop at giving a directive? What should be done to ensure that this is done?
Yeah, but I think it should not just stop at this announcement made by the Chief of Army Staff. Mm-hmm. We should actually see checks hand out to people who had this challenge over the years. And then, of course, a whole lot of people, the younger one in the force will be motivated to do more. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, people also will be encouraged to actually join the force to defend the cause of this nation.
Mm-hmm. What I find interesting is how we found ourselves in this situation, backlog of unpaid claims between 2012 and 2020. That's for like 10 years. And you're expecting these people to give their best. This is a situation where you want them to solve a problem with a national problem, but they are contending with personal problems. They have to do their own welfare, they have to do with their own well-being. How do you expect them to give their best?
Well, but I think the tide has turned.
Yeah.
That's why we are having this discussion.
So the good news is,
yes. So this is good.
This is a good development for me, and it talks about the leadership style of our president, and we hope he will continue with that style.
Yeah, but look at it, 2012 to date. We were at the heart of oil boom. So much money was coming. And all the politicians were thinking took us back to 1967. When the then military head of state, Gowon, went to Greenlander and made a very remarkable statement that Nigeria has so much money and they don't know how to spend it. That still bleeds our hearts. No road, no infrastructure. And we could afford to pay salaries for other countries at that time. So same was what happened between that time window you just mentioned. You remember the governors under Rotimi Amechi went to the Supreme Court to say this is our money, we must share it. And so while they were doing all this sharing this money, of course consumption was heavy. We're embarking on new projects and they were trying as much hand as expounding the bureaucracy. And then of course the oil dip came. We couldn't salvage it. The obligations that we have to those who work cannot be met. And you remember in the same time frame, by the time this president was coming in 2015, Buhari was coming in 2015, over 29 states in Nigeria could not pay their civil servant salary.
And they needed bailout.
So they have to bail them out on 3 successive occasions because we didn't plan. Like they say, if you fail to plan, you're actually planning to fail.
All right, if you fail to plan, you're actually planning to fail. Moving on, the Nigerian's Minister of Transportation, Senator Saidu Akali, has inaugurated the first cargo movement on Lagos-Ibadan rail corridor during his official tour to the state. Yesterday, we talked about sustainable cities. One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan in order to ensure that the transport system is efficient. And now there has been concern about the issue of congestion at the Apapa port. Apapa port is the busiest port as far as Nigeria is concerned. That's where the bulk of cargo business, shipping businesses are being done as far as Nigeria is concerned. Idauza, what do you think? What would be the impact of inaugurating this Lagos-Ibadan rail corridor as far as the minister has done? It's like the minister is on fire now. Every minister is coming up with new initiative. They're on board now. What's your reaction to this?
I think this is massive. A friend of mine, an Indian, said he did business in Nigeria some years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, and he came one day and his truck driver said that the cost of moving a vehicle from Oshodi to Apapa had increased by 200%, and he was trying to find out why. And the man said, you see, I spent 3 days on the road. I'm carrying your goods. So who will pay for it? this journey I would have done in 30 minutes and then come back and look for another money. So I have to feed my family. Now I have to be on the queue for 3 days to be able to deliver your goods. So somebody has to pay for it. Now this is the situation and the impact of logistics, constraints and challenge to even the cost of goods and services in Nigeria. And the reason is because we have been over-dependent on road transportation. So the cost is high and is heavily impacting on the cost of goods. So you see people who are moving tomato from the corner down to the south here, and you see what it takes to hire a truck to bring that load per bag, you see it's massive. And that increases the cost of goods and services. And that's why you see we're talking about food-driven inflation in Nigeria. And what is actually compounding that problem is the logistics challenge. Now, when this corridor is open, what it will mean is that, of course, there'll be a whole lot of decongestion on the road. There'll be faster movement of goods and services. Train service will be cheaper than, of course, the lorry on the road. And then, of course, the even high impact of this lorry bearing loads on our roads also will reduce a great deal. But I think it's just have to get beyond the Ibadan. And then, of course, we have to multiply it so that the entire nation is connected by rail and we can move around freely. And then you will see the huge economic impact it will have on the economy.
Yeah, so it doesn't just look like an abstract thing.
No.
Yeah, let's break it down and bring it down to the market woman in the market selling beans or rice. Now, this is good on so many levels.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that it's going to reduce the cost of production and all of that buying and selling. Let's talk about the capacity of the rail. The capacity it has to take stuff all at once.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of, say, what it can do, hundreds of buses or trailers can do at a time.
A trade can carry that.
So there's time management as well.
Oh yeah. A whole lot. There's so much that can be benefited.
Absolutely.
Even in terms of carbon emission reduction. Yes. So we're looking at it all in all facets of human life. It's going to be real blessing for us if we can multiply and replicate what the minister just did between Lagos and Ibadan. And then, of course, we can also be a transit point. What that also means is you're also decongesting Lagos, that if you can terminate at Ibadan, then people who are moving toward the north can actually also transit load from Ibadan to the north or to the other part of the country. So this reduces a whole lot of pressure on Lagos as a city. And you can't imagine the volume of time we waste on transportation.
Absolutely.
You remember when Sunday Adelaja was saying, just put it, for example, a $10 per hour or $1 per hour. If you waste 6 hours, that's $6. Multiply it by 5 days in a week, multiply it by about 10 million people, you will see the exact amount of money that we waste on traffic in Lagos. And this is because most of the Nigerian states have to depend on the Lagos port to receive goods. And this is no longer acceptable. I think we must do a lot better. Apart from even the rail system, we must also ensure that the port city in other places are functional so that Lagos can decongest and then people can be more productive.
That's great. Still on the federal government, the federal government has delisted 37 more illegal loan apps. You've had this congestion or this issue of loan apps just springing up from some, likely the online space is not regulated. And so you have things springing up every day. You have this issue of loan apps. It has been an issue in recent times. But I'm happy the federal government is tackling the issue. They had to delist about 37 illegal loan apps. What does that suggest to you about the online space in the house?
Well, I think we'll be talking about that challenge in the digital economy, that, of course, there are no sufficient regulation to that effect because it's just emerging. And when there are no rules, really, of course, you see, you cannot really have sinners or offenders, as it were. And I think is first and foremost really regulating that space and creating laws that people know how to play within that sector. But I think the problem also is that, of course, it also shows the extent to which a lot of people are also very creative and looking for means and ways to be able to generate value for themselves within the very serious economy. So we must also have to balance, you see, a regulation and the ability of people to really survive. Now, the question is, what are the real reasons for delisting?
Exactly, which is what, and you just took this right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
See, the regulator says the reason is because they're harassing Nigerian users. So this speaks to the...
You see, again, going back to the last interview you had with Pastor Sunday Adelaje, when he talks about enforcing righteousness. Okay. You see, there's a whole lot of things that are wrong in Nigeria. Where you see people, it's not just even in the loan app, even in the regular banks, where people take loan from a system. It's either they are changing their telephone, they are changing their numbers, they are changing their names even
their addresses.
And their addresses.
Why?
Just to avoid payment. This is a high risk of actually doing loans in Nigeria.
So does this absolve the lender from harassing people?
Oh, this is what I'm saying. If I don't think it's everybody they harass. It's those who are trying to escape, that they're also looking at ways to recoup or recover their money, no matter how small. So some people say, oh, it's just 3,000. Yes, 3,000, then pay back.
Yeah.
You see, if you have the dignity to approach an app or a bank to take money, you see, this is the problem with Nigeria. The real problem. We are afraid to name and shame. And this is what is actually the culture that is allowing corruption to flourish and blossom. Well, yes, if they send a text message to you, you can be highly placed, you can be anywhere you are, you should be able to look at who actually do that, who did the transaction, who gave out your telephone number. That is the person you should be after, not the loan app. I feel really that we begin to enforce righteousness, because like it says in the Holy Book, righteousness is what exalts a nation. If people cannot be faithful in little things, you cannot expect them to be faithful in much. You see, Lee Kuan Yew in his book said when he came to Commonwealth for the first time, he saw the way most of the leaders of third world were living. Many of them coming to Commonwealth meetings with mistresses and the rest of them. And then he said to himself, if a man cannot be faithful to his wife, he cannot be faithful to the state.
Okay.
And therefore, he placed a ban that anybody who is caught in an act of faithfulness to his wife cannot serve in their government.
Yeah, so I think this calls for a deeper investigation on both sides. Find out what the federal government means by harassment. What exactly do they mean? And then find out from the lender why they have resorted to that measure, if it lines up with what Idahosa has.
Yeah, but it's just a natural practice. What happens is that once you are registering, you're signing in with your phone. And as you sign in with your phone,
your details,
you are asked actually to allow or give access to your phone contacts as a form of security for the loan you are about to take. So it is the owner of the phone who gives access to the app, to their contacts on the telephone. And so once the time for repayment is due and you are not paying back, an automatic message is generated and forwarded to all the contracts on your phone. So that's security for the people who are advancing this loan. So this for me is the real issue, and this is what we need to deal with. The unfaithfulness of people who are signing up people, and this, we must look for them and where they are, and then use them to demonstrate. Then this issue will cease, rather than creating another backlog of problems, because you're stopping the maybe 3 or 4 people may be working. If you multiply that by 37, you know the number of people that you are trying to disempower economically, just to make some people feel good. So this for me is not the right way to go. And I think the real issue here is the issue about default. It's like somebody who go to take a loan and use his house as collateral. And then you are angry with the bank that they are taking the house when you are not able to pay. So this is the situation we are finding here. And people may be made to be responsible that if you are preparing to take a loan or facility that is not forced on you, you must be ready to fulfill your obligation. And if they say pay back on the 25th, and on the 25th you must pay back, and then all this embarrassment will not happen. And I think this is where the real issues lie, that people are presenting other people as security without their notice.
The emphasis here is sense of responsibility, where you know that if you have obtained a loan, you're obliged to pay back. And the emphasis here is just the issue of illegal loan have the word illegal.
Illegal, yes.
So it means they are not fully registered.
Absolutely.
Or they are not fully recognized officially. And so for that to be, that's why they have to take in the armor on them. And you see, a friend of mine talked about his experience recently, said, when you need to obtain a loan, either even from the conventional bank, they will smile at you. They will give you, they will say sweet words. But when it's time to recover the loans, you see harassment, all kind of harsh words and all that. But like we said, what's more important is sense of responsibility.
Absolutely.
As individual, you must keep your own end of the deal. If you obtain a loan, you have to pay back. You're obliged to do that. All right, let me take you to Zimbabwe, where we have an interesting story here. Let me take you to Zimbabwe. I know you're in Lagos now, but let me take you to Zimbabwe. Now, you have the president appointing his son as the deputy finance minister. You know, at the time we talked about the leadership in Africa, you know, the trend of coup coming up and all that. We laid emphasis on the need for African leaders to be transparent, to understand that it's not a personal business when it comes to governance. It's not a personal thing. It's something that has to be in the interest of the nation. What do you make of this development, having the son to the president being elected as the deputy finance minister? That's a key ministry. Finance, we are talking about money here.
Well, I may not be fully abreast with all the details or the rationale for a president to appoint his son into that very sensitive office. But I think it's a breach of governance principle. And this has to be discouraged in Africa, no matter how intelligent that chap may be. You see, because the whole idea about governance is to ensure that people are accountable and people are responsible. What would be the motivation? Are there no other qualified Zimbabweans who can do this job? This is a problem in Africa. A real huge fundamental problem. You even know that some people, even in Lagos, in Nigeria recently, were actually also wrote in and said, Tinubu should appoint his son as a minister. This is the height of sycophancy. And this is what you see around government. And this is why government are not able to think.
I think there's a name it's called nepotism.
Yeah. It's sycophancy. In short, I think...
No, I'm talking about appointing family members.
Yeah. But you see, for me, really, somebody told me once, and he said one of the courses that we sell very well if we study it in the Nigerian university is sycophancy. Because the leaders get so much of this sycophancy. You are not even there, and you see that the people who are surrounding you, they are always there protecting you without even you knowing. And they are pushing agenda that you may not even be privy to.
It's stomach infrastructure.
So this is a problem in a lot of African states. And I do hope that we really be able to transcend this kind of behaviors where we don't personalize the state and also ensure that there's inclusiveness, that people have a sense and feeling of belongingness. There's nothing that says that you cannot groom your son politically.
Yeah, but you mustn't appoint him to
It must not be appointed to your government. Because that, of course, will be some breach of the principles of good governance.
An opposite scenario of that in Nigeria is why we have what we call a federal character, right?
Yeah.
Where you have people
The
from,
spread, of course,
yeah,
inclusiveness,
yeah,
so that other people feel belong. If you have a population of over 10 million people, and then, of course, it's only you and your family that is competent enough to drive the process, you find there's a whole lot of bad feelings start to come from within. And this is what we saw in the last coup, where you see a father had resigned and then died, then the son took over, and now he's 13 years in office, and people are feeling disenchanted. Are they the only people here? Apart from Bongo, we also have other families whose names need to be mentioned. So I think Africa must grow beyond this colonialism and then begin to see how we can really allow other people to express themselves and give to society, as it were.
All right, what a way to wrap up this news analysis. Idauza, thank you for spending your time with us as usual.
Always my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll have robust discussion about our focus for today. Stay with us. All right, if you're just joining us, you have no cause to worry. The discussion for today is about to start, and we're going to look at the energy sector. We're going to look at some of the critical issues that has been happening in that sector in the last 1 year. You have a new administration in place in Nigeria. You have the new ministers in place, and everybody is doing their best to ensure that they deliver. And we're going to extend it to Africa, which is our continent. We're looking at the energy sector. Precisely, we're going to look at energy diversification, and joining us on this segment is engineer Babs Priye. He's an environmentalist. He's going to be our guest. Engineer Babs, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange. All right. It appears, I guess it's not ready for us. So, Vivian, in recent times, you know, there's been concern about the energy sector as far as Nigeria is concerned, the issue of power supply. Interestingly, when President Tinubu came on board, you know, he had to sign the electricity bill. One of the critical things he did when he came on board is the executive bill, which he had to sign. We had the Act reform, which was done in 2015 by former President Olusegun Obasanjo. You know, That has been the framework for the power sector, for the energy sector in the last 10, 20 years. But we've not seen tremendous improvement. And that's why when Tinubu came on board, one of the bills he had to approve is the electricity bill, which gives power to states, to private individuals, to states to generate power. We've had this situation in Nigeria where everything has to be connected to the national grid. When it comes to electricity, it's part of what is on the exclusive list as far as federal government is concerned. Anything on that exclusive list is the prerogative of the federal government. It means as a state or as a local government, you can't even if you generate power, you can't transmit, you can't even you have to get it connected to the national grid, and that's been a bottleneck in the system over the years. So when President came on board, that one of the things he did was to sign the electricity bill, which has been of good news to that sector.
You know that the national grid has always been collapsing.
Yeah.
It's always one collapse or the other. Plus, I was wondering why Nigeria has to suffer poor, how will I say it now? Poor electricity supply for decades. Is it rocket science?
The truth is, as far as energy resources is concerned, we are blessed when it comes to hydro, when it comes to solar, when it comes to whatever it is. Nigeria is blessed. It's not the absence of these resources, but I think the willpower to come up with the right framework.
Is it the,
we had
which
one,
we have now?
Which we have now. That's why I talked about the willpower. One interesting thing is, leadership is about solving problems. When you have a situation that has lingered over the years. In fact, recently I was listening to a report by one of our reporters that did a report about a community that they've not had access to electricity for like 2 years. Imagine people living in that community and there's no power supply. Imagine the applied, the business owners in that place, the small businesses. In fact, as far as business owners in Nigeria are concerned, they are not even depending on PHCN. They are their own PHCN because you have to provide the alternative source of power. Some of them have generators. In fact, they have 2, 3 sets so that once you're done with one, you switch to another. And that is also adding to the cost of doing businesses, the cost of operation. Imagine if I have a business now and I have to spend, let's say, 50,000 naira on power daily. And now at this era where the cost of fuel has risen,
and there's no subsidy.
There's no subsidy for me as a business owner. So you can imagine how much I'm going to spend in sustaining my business. And if that happens, it means the money that I ought to normally use to run the business, to run my daily operations, are now being diverted into sourcing for power. So you can imagine if the issue of power is being reserved, it gives business owners the encouragement to do more and to provide more in doing their business. All right. We'll go on a short break now for us to reconnect with our guests. And when we return, you'll be rest assured that Engineer Babs will be here with us to have another discussion. Stay with us. All right, it's early exchange, and we're looking at energy diversification, and we are being joined by Engineer Babs Brie, who is an environmentalist and expert when it comes to oil and gas. Engineer Babs, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange. Can you please unmute yourself so that we can have a smooth conversation? Engineer Babs, I hope you can hear me. Okay, if you can hear me, let's start with you giving us a better understanding of what it takes when you talk about energy diversification. Making reference to a country like Nigeria, I would like you to do an assessment of our present state when it comes to our energy drives, energy initiatives, and also talk about the options that are available when it comes to energy diversification. Engineer Babs, okay, why is trying to reconnect with us? So earlier we were talking about the plight of business owners, when it comes to energy supply. The normal thing is there's no light. They call it light, but the proper thing is electricity. There's no light. You hear that often, there's no light, but it's power supply. So an average business owner has devised a means, because it looks like when you're waiting for the government, you're going to wait for eternity. You didn't study the trend in there where people just, okay, let me take the bull by the horn, let me be my own government, let me provide my own environment, my own. In fact, it's so interesting that sometimes even the road to your factory, you have to construct it because you want to stay in business. So you now have a situation where business owners will now devise alternatives. Some will have generators, some will have solar power system. Even at homes, you switch from one to the other. And then because over time, people are used to irregular power supply, then you hear this like, hey, up PAC and up. So when they have the luxury of using it, it becomes like a big thing. But normally these are things Africa should enjoy, regularly. All because we don't have the right framework, we don't have the willpower.
Yeah.
It's all about leadership. It's all about sense of direction for us to get.
You and I talked earlier on that we already have the framework.
Yeah.
There's the willpower. We are hoping that there's a manifestation of what has been written on paper, right, in the physical world.
Yeah.
So it's not just, in the realm of theory. But then this is what I was going to say as per optimism. The administration that just left had some partnership with Germany and some other nations, right, as regard energy power supply in Nigeria, the Siemens, project and all of that. And then what this president is doing at the moment, I'm thinking if things go as planned, power supply will be steady in Nigeria.
The truth is, Nigerians are not asking too much, just like every other African country. In the developed world, where you have regular power supply, you have alternatives to whatever you're doing as far as energy is concerned. There are people who took the bull by the horn in terms of leadership. And so for us in Nigeria, Nigerians are not asking too much. They're asking for regular power supply. Even if you're not going to have it consistently every day, let's have a framework where you can enjoy it for like 12 hours, even for more, so that you can plan your day and see what you can do about it. They're not just relying on hydro or thermal alone, but there are alternatives like solar, commercialized.
Which is why we are talking about diversification.
Exactly.
There's wind energy.
Yes, that's why I say we are blessed.
There are lots of other things you could explore, which is why we need Babs to come on board very soon, so that we can explore all of this. You could generate power from the water.
A good example is using solar system.
Absolutely.
I'm aware of a company who came up with an initiative like a solar box now to serve houses, small businesses. So what you do is if you can charge it for like almost 4 hours, that can sustain you for a whole day. So it means whatever you have to do for that day, if you're in your house, you have access to power. And that's done by solar panel. You just buy the box, you install the panel in your house, and then that sustains you for as long as you can have the. In fact, they make it so flexible that you can pay at installments. You don't have to buy at once.
Which is good.
You pay monthly if that's convenient for you. You can pay weekly, you can pay quarterly, or you buy it at once, outright purchase. And that's kind of initiative that should be nationalized, because this is coming from a private entity to serve a particular community. Now imagine you now make it on a larger scale, serving the whole nation, where you don't have to have this over-reliance on hydro or dependence on the national grid, which you often hear it collapse every time.
Yeah, which is why there should be a robust relationship between private businesses and government. I mean, if there is synergy, a lot can be achieved. Right. You know, there's this thing that says that necessity is the mother of invention.
That's true.
Which is why you have stuff like this going on.
Yeah.
If local private businesses can cash in on the needs Nigerians have now as regards power demand, I mean, you could sit here and not have to japa and make millions of naira.
That's it. Why people japa is because there's better business environment over there, you know, living condition. I don't think, it's not about thinking, it's a reality. When you go to places like UK, Canada, you don't contend with the issue of irregular or erratic power supply.
Yeah.
So that gives you a better comfort when you're in those places. And that can be replicated here.
It can.
As far as our national grid is concerned, we have the capacity more than 12,000 megawatts. But what do we have? You have it oscillating between 3,000 and 4,000 megawatts. Today it's lesser. Today you have 2,000.
Femi, doesn't it boggle your mind? How many Nigerians are over 200 million right now?
Yes.
And we generate how many thousand megawatts?
It's between 3,000 to 4,000
to serve
megawatts.
over 200 million. Do you know what South Africa generates to serve a smaller population?
Even Ghana.
Oh,
it's more. All right. Let's go on a short break. When we return, this discussion will continue. Stay with us.
On social media, many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. We had a very interesting session, and in one of the sessions, there was a role play about a case study on CWG PLC, which is a company that I founded. And the case was written by Columbia Business School to discuss a point about venturing, about entrepreneurship, and about funding for the enterprise. And the case ended on the question, should Austin Okere take the venture capital investment or should he reject it? Just a little bit of background. So this is a company, CWG, in 2005 that was doing very well. It was riding on the back of the Y2K that just happened at the turn of the century, was riding on the back of the telecom boom. that happened immediately after the civilian government of OBJ and GSM was launched, was riding on the back of the bank consolidation in 2005 that was done by Governor Soludo. And in each of these booms, CWG had positioned and taken good advantage. So this is not a company that was in dire need of cash or was desperate in 2005. But we had a plan to list our shares on the stock market, and we thought that the best way to do it was to first do either a private placement or, better still, to do a venture capital fundraise so that they will bring discipline into our operations, governance, strengthen our governance, and of course, bring more technical knowledge. And if people saw that this company was invested in you, probably it will make the listing on the stock exchange more attractive. The issue here is at what price? And I remember that I've discussed something similar on this on social media, where many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. So if I use CWG as a case study, the case that was written by Columbia was that there was an offer of $8 million for 25% of the company, putting the valuation post at $32 million. Make no mistake, the Treasury bill's interest rate is 15% sometimes. Now, if someone is going to bring his money to invest in your company, he's looking for way more than that 15%, given that there's a high risk that his money will not come back. And the rule of thumb is that they're looking for 3 times what they brought in within 5 years. So in our case, they were going to be asking for $24 million within 5 years, or you list and give them a liquidity event or an exit. You have to check very well that this $8 million that you're taking in, you can do business in such a way that the value of the company can cough out $24 million in 5 years, regardless of exchange loss. Here is where it gets complicated. So you receive $8 million, which is converted to you in Naira. 2005 probably was about 130. Now, whether the Naira suffers devaluation or not, you're going to pay that $8 million. Now, paying $8 million 5 years later, where the Naira is maybe 250 or 260, whilst you are generating your revenue.
All right, glad to have you join us once again. We're looking at the energy market as far as Nigeria. You know, anytime you're discussing Nigeria, which is the giant of Africa, it means you're making reference to the whole continent. We're looking at the energy sector, and this time around, we want to talk about energy diversification. And we're being joined by our in-house analyst, Guru Idahosa. Glad to have you join us once again, as usual.
Always my pleasure. Yeah.
All right. Let's look at the energy mix in Nigeria, because when you talk about energy diversification, you're talking about the energy mix of a nation.
Yeah, of course.
We've had this situation in Nigeria, over-reliance on one supply, one source, which is hydro, crude, and all that. Yeah. We've not been able to explore the sources. Talk to us, your observation about the energy mix in Nigeria. Why do we have this situation?
Well, I think what we've seen over time is a fact that the cost of actually diversification is what is humongous. And especially a resource-starved nation like Nigeria, you need to really put a whole lot in place to be able to diversify. It's not as we have not diversified. We have made several attempts at diversification. Take, for example, just electricity energy, for example. In 2011, Nigerians signed a contract with Siemens to generate some wind energy. And incidentally, when that contract was signed, we were in the UAE. And that same day, UAE signed the same contract with Siemens. And the delivery date was 2 years. November 2012, Siemens had delivered in the UAE. Nigeria own is still in the pipeline.
Why?
That we cannot speak to, really. You see, this is the real issue. And I think this is where, for us, where we continue to speak to the morality of those who get into agreements or who do business in our environment. Since 2009 to date, you see, UAE has, of course, they don't have any challenge, but they have consistently invested in this side of the energy to the extent that they have been able to actually average the cost of conventional energy and then, of course, with solar. They have leveraged it. So in the UAE now, the cost is the same because of consistent investment. But it was not something they did in one phase. They move gradually. And I think this is what we must do as a nation to see how we can use multiple sources to generate energy, not over-relying on ones. But like we keep saying, you can't do this until you have somebody who has the guts to really say, let's change the way things are doing. And I think this is where, again, not really singing the praise of this current regime, is the fact that they are taking some very basic steps to ensure that this is achievable. That even states now are being empowered to generate from multiple sources. No longer restricted like it was when the president now was governor in Lagos State, and he tried to attempt that diversification, and then, of course, the federal government did not allow and permit it to go. And I think this is one thing that, of course, most states have to leverage on now. Individuals are beginning to invest in this sector, and as value starts to come, probably in the few years to come, a whole lot will change. We don't know the contract that was reached, agreement that was reached in India recently, where that investment is going into, whether it's toward the renewable or it's going toward the solar, is going toward the wind. We don't know. But I think we are blessed with these options. The coal is here with us. Water is here for us. Sunlight is here for us. Wind is here for us. So we can harvest all these things. And really, as a country, we should not be talking about energy challenge.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we have this investment in these multiple sources in one basket, just like India has also done, because they have the same problem. And today, India is out of the problem, and they are supplying energy, selling energy to about 4 countries, neighboring countries. We can also leverage on what God has given to us and then become a major energy supplier to the rest of West African coast.
You know, you said it was in 2011 that Nigeria signed the agreement with Siemens. One of the things you also said was that UAE got what they wanted in 2 years,
yes,
because of consistency.
Yeah.
So let's talk about inconsistency in governance in Nigeria, where an administration starts a project, leaves, and then the incoming one just leaves it. What would you say to the agreement that the outgone administration signed with Siemens? What should this administration do about it to ensure that it comes to fruition?
Well, I think a whole lot needs to be done in terms of review of contracts and agreement, the way they are signed in Nigeria. Because sometimes we also don't factor in. I remember the last time when I was having a conversation with some public officers and we're talking about risk management, especially against the backdrop of ISO 31000. And looking at signing contracts where you are actually not looking at the terms of those contracts and just put a pen to it, and then it becomes detrimental to you. Remember the P&ID case, where some people just signed out and they probably took 100 million, and that thing is costing the nation almost several billion in return. So these are the issues you find when you have a public policy, civil service that is always rent-seeking. It's not that they don't know what to do. Sometimes we just do things just for our own individual benefit. And this is happening in almost all sectors. There's a video that was going viral yesterday when the new Minister for Works was talking to somebody and he said, we're saying there's no road in the southeast. You have opportunity to get a road. You say you have done 5 kilometers. Where's the 5 kilometers of road you have done?
Nothing to show for
Nothing to show for it. Now, the minister don't need to be in that place because there are engineers in the Ministry of Works who should be overseeing this job and ensure that the contract that is signed and somebody is executing it. So I keep saying the problem is always not politicians, as people tend to believe. It's more with the civil service who are supposed to implement the policies that the politicians are putting in place. But here, there's so much deficit in that angle. And this is what we really need to speak to. And this is why a lot of contracts we enter into, you really never see them come to the light of the day. Because we have to really find a way to purge our public service and ensure that they are working. And they are working for their money. No nation can survive without a very vibrant civil service who is willing to do everything lawful to see that the nation grow. If our civil service was strong enough and vibrant enough, we will not be talking about politicians being corrupt. Because they are actually the ones that are creating that platform and the bedrock for the corruption we see within the system. I think that is all that is happening, because once you don't speak to these issues and somebody is held accountable for things not done well, we will remain where we are.
So the institution is what you're saying. It should be functional.
Oh, it should be very functional. Public service must be very functional. We must see that we sign contract and we're doing it on behalf of our nations. There should be service level agreement reached with entities for the interest of the nation, not for the interest of one individual. And this is the whole idea. So when you see other places where people are thinking for the good of others, for the good of the state, they get into agreement and they ensure that the agreement is done. Because in the UAE, if you are given a contract and of course you don't meet your service level agreement, that contractor is completely blacklisted. And in most cases, they are also made to refund whatever they have taken because it's part of the agreement.
So they make a scapegoat out of you.
Out of you, yeah. So everybody is struggling to perform. So you can't get in there and mess up because they will mess you up. So this is the issue. So I think Nigeria must get to that point where we are entering into public agreements. Even their local contractors or foreign contractors, we must be strong enough to see these agreements is mutually beneficial. That people get money and they deliver what they're supposed. But again, one issue again that has also been, of course, which has actually also left the room for this to happen. I remember some time ago when the now Minister of FCT was the governor in Rivers State, spoke to this issue. Where you award contracts and you don't have money to fund it. And we saw this happen since people go to say, oh, we go to FEC meeting today, federal government approved 20 billion. You go to FEC meeting next week, federal government approve a contract of 30 billion. You go to FEC meeting 3 weeks after, federal government approve. But there's no money to execute these things. So I think this is also very important. Even when the procurement says that you cannot procure until there is money to do it. But yet we still violate the Procurement Act, which says that you cannot actually procure until you have money to fund it, and then we still sign a contract. So you sign a contract, you give a contract of 20 billion, you are not able to mobilize up to 2%. You can't expect the contractor to do anything. So this is also an issue that government must also look into. That before we go to say we want to give a contract, we must ensure that these things are phased out and we know what we can afford today, what we'll be able to afford next year, and how many years it will take for us to phase this thing out, and then government on their part are not defrauding in terms of funding contractors to go to site.
Talking about funding, you know, President Tinubu in June, signed the electricity bill into law. And you will naturally expect that after that, states, private entities will take advantage of that. Sorry about that. 3 months down the line, you just cover that nothing is being done. What do you think is largely responsible? You talked about the issue of funds. Could it be the issue of funds or initiatives, or there are no partnership to take advantage of? What will you expect of state governments to do, local governments, private entities who are in this sector to take advantage of this bill being signed into law?
Well, I think a whole lot, especially when it comes to energy matter. It's not an investment you do today and you're expecting to make millions out of it tomorrow. So it will take some long gestation period for profit to start to come in. And now, if you sign these laws, people also have to look at basic macroeconomic indices around your environment to think of putting money into your economy from the private point of view. Now, if this thing is not going to guarantee profit, nobody want to do it. And I think this is where, of course, we need a lot of participation, states and private sector participation, where we are actually able to get into an agreement that people begin to have confidence in the system. I've had this argument everywhere. I had opportunity to speak to people. The most successful PPP project in Nigeria would have been the Lekki Toll Road. Now, since the NSAS program, no toll has been collected on that bridge. Now, how does the investor get money out of it? That's a huge challenge. Now, if you're having non-state actors, much more powerful than the state actors, it will be difficult for people to bring money into your environment to do projects. Because if anything happens, you can't guarantee the return on investment. Because what we see here, those NSAS people say, look, you can't collect toll there. And since 2020 to date, the road is still there. It's used. Investors' money, now the state government have to buy off that. I don't know how many states will have such capacity to get into such contract. And you see, this is where, of course, again, we need to speak to the issues of security within our state or our states. What are we going to do to begin to mobilize the energy of human beings so that we can protect critical infrastructure? Because this will be the incentive that will drive people to come and invest in your environment. Now, once you're having this bad case, for example, here in PPP, then everybody are skeptical. If I bring in my money, will it be secured? Who will protect it? Because the non-state actors are proving to be much more powerful than the state actor itself. And this, we have to find a way to reverse. And this must also be urgent to the president. Because no matter how much we paint a picture of a good ecosystem for investment, people are also reading and trying to be sure that what is promised can be delivered.
So what you're speaking to is an enabling
Environment, of course.
for business.
For business to try.
So you use the Lekki toll gate as an
example, yes.
So if you look at other climes, there is no over-dependence on government for provision of most of these amenities.
Okay, it's private investments. A lot of private investments.
Which is lacking in Nigeria. But there's something you said earlier on, that investing in energy is not, it has to gestate.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a gestation period.
Yeah.
Could it be one of the reasons why you don't have lots of private investment in that sector? Take a look at the oil business, for example. You have lots of private players. Take a look at the banking industry. You have lots of private players because it just doesn't have to gestate for a very long time. So what should be done to unlock private investment in the energy sector to ensure energy efficiency?
Well, I think a lot also is happening at the moment, looking at the LNG model, for example. That would be a whole lot that can encourage people to participate, where, of course, because even globally, you see, in the transition for energy, there's more state investment than real private sector investment.
Okay.
Because most states are really spending up to about 2.4 of the GDP investing in the non-renewable energy sector, because not many people want to get money into that place because of profits that is coming. Now, what you have is that you must have a model which is going to be private-public partnership, where, of course, state will have to get some maximum commitment into the project for other people to come and put their money in. And I think that's what, of course, the Minister of Solid Minerals is trying to do in that sector, to also create a corporation around where state will have to have substantial investment in that sector, and this will encourage other people to either buy as shares in there, and the risk is reduced. And then, of course, if profits start to come in, they can take it in trickles. But to expect that the state, the private will put plenty of money into this project, I think it will still be a starry-eyed dream for some time.
Okay.
Let's talk about, alternative sources of energy, because when you talk about energy diversification, you have to provide multiple sources. Let's look at the issue of solar. For instance, I am aware of a local government where a particular private entity provides services to that particular location. When it comes to solar panel, there's this solar box and all that. What do you expect of the government so that you nationalize this kind of package or idea on the commercial level? I'm aware there are even state governments who make use of solar, to power their street lights, some of their, power plants and all that. How do we ensure that this alternative is done on a larger scale so that an average Nigerian can have proper access to it and then could be able to afford when it comes to solar alternatives?
Okay. Now you look at it again, there are two things really critical to this sector. The first is fund we have spoken about. This other part is technology, which of course is also not indigenous. And that is why it's expensive. It's huge, because the technology for solar is not indigenous. You have to purchase it. And this is also a big problem. And this is why you see we can't do it in huge scale, because it also will require heavy investment to be able to, for example, generate 2,000 kilowatts of electricity via solar. So it's a whole lot of investment. You see, this diversification is not something that can happen in one, how am I going to put it, in a short term. Because if you have looked at the transitions over history, from fire before we got to where we are, you see it took like 1 century. We got to coal. Between coal and, of course, the solar took almost about 40 years. So it's going to take a whole long-term investment to arrive at what we should naturally have. But what is important is that the electricity bill that was signed had already given vent to these opportunities. So we're going to be seeing some pocket of improvements as people start to put money in trickles into these new sources. And then we can see how we can also domesticate some of these technologies and see to reduce the costs. And then, of course, it can serve wider audience and population. But this is going to take some time. It's not something that can be in the immediate.
All right, that's great. Like I always say, the conversation is getting bigger, and we're having another expert joining us on this segment. We're being joined by Aro, who is an energy expert. Aro, thanks for joining us on Early Exchange.
Good morning. Good to be here again.
Oh,
how are you guys doing?
We're doing great. We're glad to have you join us. Now let's look. We're looking at energy diversification. I would like you to, for a start, do an assessment of that energy diversification initiative in Nigeria. Take us through what we have at the moment as far as Nigeria is concerned, and then what do you think we can do to take advantage of the alternatives that are available? You have coal, you have gas, and which has been the trend globally. Talk to us about your assessment of the energy diversification initiative in Nigeria and then the alternatives that are available.
Let me take it up from where Dr. stopped, where he talked about the investment, about it being capital. The investment required is capital intensive. That is the thing. So, and when you have something like that that is capital intensive, the diversification has to come from the top, from the government policies, and government creating the environment for such kind of investment to come in. Now, at that level, the level of government, when compared to the energy opportunities we have in Nigeria, we are not diversifying at all. Now, as far back, so many years ago, I was at the Federal Environmental Protection Agency as far back as 1998. We developed a national policy on environment and all that. Renewable energy was part of it. It has always been the core of where Nigeria's energy should go to. But in terms of government taking action, no action whatsoever. That's the truth. But when you look at individuals, there are over 70 million generating sets in Nigeria. It was a government policy and working with China that brought in a lot of generators into Nigeria. Whereas we've had the policy to go renewable even long before some of those, all sorts of generators started coming in. So for the government level, no. But individuals, if you look at it now, so many houses are being powered by solar. Mine is an example. The studio you're in is an example. Now, and when you check it, for most businesses in Nigeria, 70 to 80% of their profit goes into energy. And if Nigeria has to grow in any way, in any sector, it has to be through energy. If you take the LNG plant, for instance, that we are talking about, that plant is being run by generators. So what are we talking about? So you make like $2 billion, but you're spending like $18 billion for energy that could have been saved across the country. So that is where the problem is. And I don't think at that level the government has done enough. And there are so many things we could do. For instance, there is Naseni, or what's it called, is here in Abuja. There are many centers where research is currently going on, where solar panels have even been produced locally. But we've not been able to build on all this, such that the technology, like Doctor said, for renewable energy is currently being imported. So when you think about the amount of of money an individual has to pump in through solar, even though it will save him in the long run. But when you check about the amount of money you have to pump in at that initial stage, because everything is dollar dependent, then it becomes very difficult for anybody to really diversify. But if we really want to grow this economy in any aspect at all, the main focus of this current administration should be that diversification. Use what we have. We have solar. We have enough sunlight in Nigeria. Even in the midst of this rainy season, you don't need that much solar energy to power your solar panel. We have it all here. We have the sea right there in Lagos. We have flooding everywhere. For instance, now, once the Lago Dam is opened again, there will be flooding anytime from now. What do we do with that water? We used to have the dams work and generate electricity, but for a long time, we've not been able to do that. What about wind? You need to travel. You need to travel, along the roads in Nigeria this period and see the amount of wind that brings down huge trees. That could be converted to energy, but the technology to be able to do that is what is expensive, which we have to import, and which is a problem currently. And there are loads of things we could do. For instance, because it's capital intensive, huge multilateral companies, government organizations can first be mandated to run on solar. They have the investment that can do that. And then you leave the electricity for the ordinary Nigerians that can't make that huge investment. That's one. Two, we have this gas plant now. We are talking about using gas for cars, using gas for this and all that, but most of our gas is exported. And that is why domestic use is very expensive. For instance, the government can tell the LNG, stop exportation until when local domestic use has been taken care of. Little things like that. And then you begin to see a lot of change here and there, happening here and there.
I would like Doctor to respond to what Aro has just said. But before that, though, a new report by the International Renewable Energy Agency says that nearly 60% of Nigeria's energy demand in 2050 can be met with renewable energy sources. Now, what that means is it's going to free up 40% in natural gas and 65% in oil needs at the same time. What's your take to that, and also to what Aro just said?
Yeah, I think Aro had really hit the nail on the head. These are potentials. Potentials are not actual. Yes, we can free up as much, but what's the level of investment that we need to put to be able to do this? Even at the global level, since 2015, of course, from Paris 2015 to date, we're still talking about this renewable energy funding. How are we going to get the money to actually do this? The potentials are there. The sunlight is here. The water body is here. The gas is the coal is here. We have the crude here. So it's not about the potential. It's how to convert this potential to real-time energy that is actually the challenge. And this is where investment is coming. Globally, for example, up to this moment, $2 billion annually, governments across the globe is spending on renewable source so that they'll be able to meet up the target of 2057 of a zero carbon emission deadline. And this is expected to increase to about 4.6 trillion from 2030. Those are huge sums of money the nation will need to put on to be able to get this potential to become actual.
But that's not too much to ask. Why? Because if you don't invest, the businesses you lose is even costlier than what you might need to invest.
Now, but this is the issue. You can do the investment. Now, somebody had to be the off-taker of that investment. Now, does that business have the capacity to actually pay for what you are generating? And this is why you see globally energy is subsidized. Because the cost of generation is massive compared to the cost that the average business will be able to pay. Now, if business will pay, can the man who is going to be the end user of your product able to pay for the energy that is added to the cost of your product that's being sold? This is the issue. It's a whole lot of cycle that we must navigate. And that was why, if you remember, during the town hall meeting, then the president was campaigning, and this issue came up on conversation and said, what are you going to do with climate change? And he said, well, I don't want to say much because we are still campaigning. But he said something that was very, very instructive to me in that conversation. And he said the whole of Europe and the north of America had grown on coal, for example. Now they have made so much money. They can actually power that investment in renewable source. But we have not even been able to meet our energy demand. And you say we should not use coal. He said two things can happen. It's either you allow us to use coal to get to your level, otherwise give us some money to fund the renewable energy so that we can leave coal behind. Now, this is a conversation. And this is where we need to do and strike the balance. And that's why I spoke earlier about government fundamentally involved, and then, of course, private investment can buy equity in what government is doing, but that requires a whole lot of sincerity from those who is going to run those enterprises.
All right, let's get back to Aro. I would like you to talk about the action that was taken by President Tinubu in June when he came on board. He signed into law the electricity bill, which is to authorize states, local governments, and private entities to come on board to generate. You know, when it comes to the electricity in Nigeria, there are three phases. You have the generation, distribution, and transmission. Now, what do you expect of states or private entities to do to take advantage of this bill being signed into law by the president?
This is not new. It's been going on for a long time. There's been this discussion. Now, let me take us back, because I was part of the setup of the NDDC. Now, during that visit, I got to find out that before locations in Biostar states, for instance, many of those riverine oil towns, cities, before they were connected to the national grid, they never had power failure, because those communities were being powered by gas turbines put there by the various oil companies working there. They had constant electricity. But the moment they got connected to the national grid, problems started, because the policy says all power goes to the center and then is redistributed. And then the policy before now was that states did not have the power to generate their own electricity. But funny enough, this law was on paper, because there were several states that had local generating plants. Even in Jos, there was what was called NISCO then, a company that provided electricity privately to a part of Jos. So the truth about it is that many of the state governments are not really serious. They are not really thinking about their people, and that's why they come up and say blah, blah, blah. Now, this policy has been passed. It's now left for the state to take it up. Those states that are not serious will still not do anything about the policy. I know Delta State, for instance, has started a project with regards to that. Even Akwa Ibom State has started a project, of course, supported by the oil companies there. And this is one of the best moves for power generation that can happen to Nigeria. Now, I would stay here now and challenge the northern states with all the solar there, 12 months of the year, to now invest in solar projects, community-based solar projects. You find out that the power demand in all those communities are not even much. So with little solar there, you could power the needs of those communities. So for me, this is one of the best decisions to be taken in the power sector in Nigeria. But now it's left for the state governments to be serious, to think about it, put together a think tank, look at which one, it's not the same thing will not work everywhere, which one works for you. If, for instance, solar is the one that works for you, you invest in it. Areas where we have, riverine areas, what works for you? Areas where you have the oil companies who are still doing gas flaring, what works for you? Will the gas turbine work for you? Go back to it. Then the other thing I want to say is this. There also needs to be a policy that mandates a certain percentage of tax coming from the oil industry to go into renewable energy. Right now, all the oil companies, there's tax for gas flaring, there's tax for this that goes to the center, and it just goes straight into the regular coffers of government and all that. We have what we call ecological fund, which is a certain percentage mandated to go for something. Now, we should have that as a law, that a certain percentage goes to development of renewable energy. Just like Dr. Idahosa was saying. Now, if you go to some other developed countries today, they had a plan to move from coal. Now, what they did was that from the proceeds from coal, money was being put into research for alternative sources of energy. Money was being put into developing technology for that source of energy. In Nigeria, we don't do that. Now, if we've done that since when we signed those laws to end gas flaring within a certain period, and that amount had been going into research, has been going into development of alternative energy sources, we could have been doing that. I think we need to find time to bring the people at Naseni here to tell us what is really happening. We have these centers. These centers have been set up for a long time. What is really happening? A couple of years ago, I got to find out that solar panels are being manufactured locally in Nigeria. What is the government doing to scale it up? That means we've been able to get technology that could develop solar panels here, but what are we doing about that? So there needs to be that deliberate effort to pass certain funds into that aspect, and then we see it working over time. Already, individuals have keyed into renewable energy. Today, nobody needs to tell you to save up money to get solar panels and batteries for your house. So if individuals are keen into this and making deliberate plans to save for solar, what is the government doing? Are there deliberate policies? In Lagos, for instance, we've just got the light rail. One beautiful thing about it that people have not talked about is that it's run on electricity, which means that if the government is serious about renewable energy, even our transport system can be run on renewable energy. That light rail can actually be run on renewable energy, and it saves a lot. Now, the cargo stuff from Apapa to Ibadan are just started. Now, you can imagine when you take out that energy cost from transportation, what it will lead to in the economy. So we need to start thinking towards that line and make deliberate policies to set aside deliberate funds from the tax everybody is paying to develop renewable energy. And that way, we could scale it up faster. But if there is no deliberate plan, when you just put a policy there, say, okay, states are now allowed to, What does that mean?
Okay.
If it's not the priority of a governor, it does nothing about it. But if there's that deliberate policy that says so amount of the tax goes into this, then there will be that desire and move to think towards that direction and act towards that direction.
So let me come in here. You talked about a deliberate plan. So if you talk about a roadmap that ensures efficiency in this sector, you take a look at generation, transmission, and distribution of power. How well, or what kind of synergy have we had in Nigeria as regards these three different components?
Unbundling, first of all, the policy to unbundle NEPA, that name will never change no matter what anybody does. And that policy to unbundle NEPA was very good. And the generation is still kept with government, because if you don't generate, you wouldn't have anything to distribute. And the more you generate, the more you have to distribute, the cheaper the energy will be in future. And the more energy you have, the more businesses can work. There are people who are willing to pay for energy, but you just don't have it. The light is not there. But there are people who are willing to pay, but they just don't have it. So that policy was very good. Now, privatizing the discos is also good. Unbundling it is good. But I am not very sure, that the synergy is really working very well. We found discording comments and things that have come up amongst them. I don't think it's working very, very well. When we link it to renewable energy, for instance, I have not seen any synergy, any real plan, real connection between the generation of power, the distribution, the transmission and distribution, in trying to link that to renewable energy. All the talk has always been our regular energy coming from the gas plants and the the dams, the few dams that still work once a year. That is all. There is no synergy when you talk about linking the aspects of renewable energy to it. None of the discos are even thinking about that. We've not had any comment whatsoever. And the discos are just there to generate revenue for themselves, just make money. Nobody is thinking, okay, what else can we do? Let's take, for instance, some companies some years back were given license to import cement. And we're told that you are given this license so that after a couple of years, you would have money to put together your own plant and start producing locally. Now, do we have that kind of plan? Do we have that kind of plan with making discos and whoever think towards supporting projects on renewable energy? We don't have anything like that. So everybody is just, how do we make money from what is currently available? And when it finishes, we sell off the company and everybody goes back to square one. So in terms of synergy, in terms of thinking along the lines of sustainability, along the lines of renewable energy, is currently not there. And this is something we need to think about. And the discos, who are the major players, have to be brought into this discussion and make them think towards that line.
All right, you will agree
Now,
with me
and
the greatest
the beautiful
challenge
thing
when
is
it
that
comes to power distribution in Nigeria comes in the area of transmission, where you talk about the issue of national grid collapse. There's a report stating that as far as the last administration was concerned, the national grid collapsed for like 98 times. Now, I would like you to talk to us what we can do to manage our transmission losses. You have this systemic problem over the years. Yes, we've not been able to manage it. What do we do as a nation to manage our transmission losses so that there will be efficiency in that sector now that we're looking at a way forward?
Some people usually say government can manage things, can do that. I don't believe that. I'm not part of that school. I believe government organizations are made of individuals like me. If I can manage my house, I can manage that. You know, the FCT minister just made a funny comment that if you can manage to get a good microphone sound system somewhere, how can you manage the FCT? Now, it's something like that. So if you come into government and you can't manage your house, you can't manage your business, you can't manage government very well. And that is the truth. But a lot of the breakdown has been sabotage. Not sabotage even from high places. Walk into, now it's changed a bit with the discos. That's why I said the unbundling was very good. You walk into the local NEPA office and you see what even the smallest staff there does. A lot of things is because of sabotage. And that is the simple truth. Now, when you unbundle even the generation, I am telling you, it will work. Now, I'm not talking about unbundling it and taking it away totally from government, because we will now be left in the hands of people who want to cut our throat to make profit. No. But unbundling it such that, for instance, I can give you an instance. Let's say, for instance, I live in Lugbe, for instance, in Abuja, for instance. And now you've told the states that they could generate electricity and all that. And then Lugbe has its own generation that does not have to go to the center. And then everybody has prepaid meters. Now, you find out that you cannot make money from estimated bills if people, you cannot make money from prepaid meters if people don't have that electricity got into them. So you want to make sure that as much as possible, you send that energy out. So there will be no case of, say, somebody trying to break down the sabotage the system such that no energy goes out, so that somebody gives you money to repair something because it's centrally controlled and government has to fund that part. No. If energy does not go out, you don't get any money. And once you break down, you become broke. You don't get a salary, you don't get anything. So if we unbundle it such that all local transmitting plants is what you send out that will pay your salary, everybody will sit up. They'll make sure they generate a lot of energy. They'll make sure they send it out. In fact, if you don't need 24 hours light, they'll make sure they give you 24 hours light so that your prepaid meter keeps running. They keep generating a lot of money. They get paid. And that way, it will solve these issues of breakdown. Because, for instance, you have generation coming from different places, then they get to those distribution plants, then someone now does something funny at that distribution plant, and everything generated gets stuck at that plant. There's a breakdown there, and then it doesn't get to people. But if you unbundle it, generate locally, send out locally, make your money locally, and run that thing efficiently, then we'll not have all those issues. Once again, I repeat, all the breakdown we've been talking about, if you trace it very well, it's just like our refineries that we've been pumping billions into to fix since. In a couple of months, an individual has set up a refinery. What does that tell us? There are Nigerians that have refineries in so many places. We have modular refineries that are being blown up every day. Now, if people can get up and create little modular refineries in the riverine areas, what does it tell us? Nigerians are very industrious people. We could generate enough power, we could pass this power out, and we would not have any challenge.
That's great. Now, let me come back to the studio now. Let me come back to Idahosa. You know, he was talking about unbundling that sector, especially when it comes to the area of transmission. I would like you to still talk to us. Let's have your take on the issue of managing transmission losses, which we've been experiencing over the years.
You see, I think, yes, why I may agree to some extent with the conspiracy theory in terms of sabotage, but I think there's a whole lot that has not really been also put into conversation in terms of the obsolete technology. Because the technologies that are driving this process, we've not had new investments. They are old and they are obsolete. As we speak, 50% of generated energy in Nigeria is lost on transmission. It's not even available for sale, it's lost. And this is due to technological and human capacity issues. And this is why I keep emphasizing. You see, any nation that must grow must find a way to invest in themselves. How do we build technology that are locally driven to drive this process? So that in terms of maintenance, just like you mentioned about the refineries, they will not be too expensive. You see, it is easy, and I think that's been the problem within the refineries. You have one technology built it, and you are bringing a different technology to come and refurbish it. It won't work. It will not work. So this is a problem, and this is why the refineries are they're almost non-fixable, because the taking design that put it into place and the one that is trying to fix it are two different technologies, two different people. This is a problem. What people do everywhere is that you put a system in place and ensure that the man who do the design is the one doing the maintenance for a period of time, because you understand the system and understand how it works. Now, you see, there's a philosophy which seems to be working in Africa, that if it is working, don't fix it. This is the wrong approach to life. In the West, is destroy it so that you can remake it. And I think this is where we need people in the intellectual circle to actually come on board to say, yes, this is working. We know it is working. Like Thomas Kuhn said in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, science or technology don't grow linearly. They grow by disruptions. And this is what the Western country has been doing. You can imagine, since the cost of energy had been going up and down, creating a whole lot of distortions in their economy. In the last 20 years, there have been massive investments in alternative technologies. And I think this is what also we need to do. Yes, I said to somebody, even if you say you want to fix the Port Harcourt refinery, the Warri refinery, or the Kaduna refinery, they will not work. Because those technologies are out of date.
So you're saying
it is cheaper to build a new one with the current technology. And then, of course, you may not need to have to do heavy investment. And that's why when he speaks to the issues of modular refineries, so that when the technology are out of date, you can quickly replace them. So it will not be like a lifetime investment. In the 70s, in the 80s, technology lasts a long time. But now it changes almost per second because people are doing research on a daily basis. And so we must also be as, how am I going to put it now? We must be in touch with reality of the changes. Management scholar says we live in a volatile world. Very volatile world. The rate of change is high. Uncertainty everywhere. We're facing a lot of complexity. We're facing a lot of ambiguity. Now, when you live in such an environment, the only way to survive, they also say, is vocal. You need a lot of visioning. You need a lot of understanding. You need a lot of clarity and agility to be able to survive in a vocal world. And I think this is where our own government, especially in this part of the world, must begin to become agile. What is actually slowing a lot of things down for us is bureaucracy. And every time I ask people, what's the real usefulness of bureaucracy? And they say to you, oh, you see, bureaucracy, they put it in place because we really don't understand why Max Weber was taking bureaucracy. He was only trying to solve two problems. The first problem was indiscipline, and the second problem was incompetence. Because people are incompetent and people are indisciplined, as the knowledge was not escalating, it feels that you have to put some certain structure in place so that you can mitigate the impact of incompetence and indiscipline. So which means if people become disciplined, and of course the level of competence increases, bureaucracy becomes a misnomer. And I think this is where we need to really have to do a lot, because why a lot is not working here is bureaucracy. Once you can remove those bureaucratic bottlenecks, a lot of things will work.
I want to take us back to our guest. I'd like for you to react to what Idahosa just said as to not going with the trends and obsolete equipment. You know, he said, there's something very important he said, that over 50% of what's generated is lost due to obsolete equipment. Do you share this sentiment?
Yes, it's even more than 50% if you want to go to it. One of the major issues in Nigeria is wastage and loss in all sectors. Energy is one of it. The last time I was talking about water issues. Is the same problem. Power that we generate in Nigeria is lost in so many ways. Once there's a breakdown, there's a loss. That's one thing people don't know. When you generate power, it doesn't go back. It doesn't go back. If it doesn't get to the end user, it is lost. Any breakdown amounts to loss of power, is wasted. And that's the truth. And so that is why when we talk about technology that makes things easy is what we need to work on. Modern day technology, doctor said it. You know, I was talking about the modular refineries. If individuals can create small refineries, and a lot of that's, whether we like it or not, with all the sanctions, the policing and everything, the diesel produced from those modular refineries still gets into the market every day. So that means there is a technology that makes these things simple. So when we unbundle the generation aspect of it, we'll be able to identify simple technology that we could use. For instance, let's take solar, for instance. If you want to do a massive solar that can power plant that can power a full community, it will cost you a lot of money. But do you know that if you decide to do little bits, small bits of that same solar to power a community, not one system powering the whole community, but little system powering, you know, various aspects of the community, do you know that it is a lot cheaper? It will cost you about 20% of the actual amount that you would have used to do the massive system to power the entire community. So that's the way we need to start thinking about unbundling the generation aspect. Develop technologies that could generate little energy that could take care of this little area, and then you keep on going like that. And like I said initially, there needs to be that deliberate policy to mandate organizations that can fund it. These multilateral organizations working in Nigeria, it's from their parent countries. They are also telling us, like Doctor said, don't use coal, don't use this, don't use that. But their companies are the ones consuming a lot of our energy here and polluting the environment here without making any deliberate investment in renewable energy. So if you mandate those major companies that, look, you must invest in renewable energy for your business, they will do it. They have the funds to do it. And by them doing that, they would also attract international attention, which would mean that Nigeria is now moving towards renewable energy as a government. And then you will see international investment starts coming. Now, a lot of the efforts we do, individual efforts we've done in Nigeria with regards to renewable energy, is usually not seen by the international world. What the international world sees is still the amount of generating sets that we import into Nigeria every day. That is what the international world sees. But if, for instance, international organizations are mandated, they would know that, yes, this government is serious and they have the investment to do these things. So, for instance, I set up a company here and is run on solar. What government is currently producing from the regular energy goes into the community.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let me bring this to you, Idel. You're in the studio. I would like you to talk while we're trying to reconnect with Maro. I would like you to make an input as regards the energy exchange, which he was actually talking about. I would like you to, have your take in this regard and then make your input.
Yeah, if you have also followed the trend and the conversation in this industry, one of the things that is also spoken to, apart from the losses that are caused by generation, is the fact that DISCO are also not taking enough power that is generated. And this is also a fundamental problem in the industry. Now, of course, there's also a provision in the Unbundling Act that actually had made a provision for the energy exchange market. Thank God, of course, again, this regime is talking a lot about commodity board. And I think India has done this energy market just the way you trade stock daily. People buy energy and store and then use later. These technologies are available. So that if I said, okay, the peak period I use energy is maybe during December, and the cost of energy is low at this moment, I can actually buy. What that means is that it will be releasing fund to both the distributor, the transmitter, and the generator in advance to generate. But the energy exchange market here is not working. I think it's only in Lagos that they've done something that is close to that, which of course is the prioritization of locations. And say, oh, you are giving high value because you consume more, you need more. But I don't think that is what should happen. We should have an energy market that is traded daily, where consumer can have access to buy energy till when they need it. And they can actually buy to keep, just the way you buy stock and you keep your stock. So we should have a functional energy market in operation. It's operating in India as we speak, because India has the same problem we had. So they had to unbundle these things into generation also, into transmission, into distribution, allowing people to invest in this sector, but also created an energy exchange market where people trade on energy on a daily basis. And I think this will go a long way, because it's a proper business. So people can see their profit, and they know that they have obligation to deliver. And if they are not delivering, then of course you have a cost to pay to the company. If I buy energy from you to use in December and I can't see the energy to use in December, of course, the agreement will make me to take you to court. So this also will help a lot to be put in place, that the requisite investment that is needed in the sector, we can actually harvest it in the present. And I think this is where we're also missing out in the energy equation, because there's no functional energy market where people can actually trade on energy and then they can buy and use in the future.
All right, let's bring Aru back. Aru, we had some inconsistency earlier on, but it's good to know you're back. And it would be remiss of us not to let you land. You were saying something, so I would like for you to finish your train of thought and then react to what Idahosa just said about energy exchange. I mean, if India can do it, why not Nigeria?
But I don't know where I stopped from my trail of thought then. maybe you could tell me, because I was just talking, I didn't even know I was off. But with regards energy exchange, that is something that I think the technology has been there since. Now, if you go to even South Africa here, for instance, I have renewable energy at home. I have my solar, and I generate more than I consume. I can send even that same, I can, from my house, send back to the grid. It's done in the US, done in so many places. That technology is there. I can send it back to the grid, sell it back to the people that sold it to me, and generate money for myself, the excess energy I have. But excess energy in Nigeria just goes. And for people who don't know, those who have solar, sometimes batteries get damaged as a result of excess energy overcharging. Where does the excess go to? The technologies are there. It's just for us to apply this. And I can tell you that the technological firms in Nigeria, the technological institutes in Nigeria have this technology. What we require is just that deliberate move to make them bring it out, and then government puts the investment. And I think I was talking something about making multilateral organizations to invest in solar for their own businesses, their own offices. And when that is done, it draws attention globally. Currently, what the global world sees of us is the amount, the number of generating sets being imported into Nigeria. The figures are there. Over 70 million generating sets in Nigeria. What is our population, for goodness sake? That is what the world sees. Yes, there has been increase in amount of solar panels being imported, in amount of batteries being imported currently, but that does not really speak to the mindset of where the nation is going. But if you mandate a multilateral company, for instance, that look, part of the deal for you to do business in Nigeria is that your organization must run on renewable energy. It sends a message globally. And then what it does, the ripple effect is that it now brings investment. They will now know that, oh, this is now a major market in Nigeria. It's a growing area in Nigeria where investment can come into. Like the few deals that President Tinubu has gone into now with India, with the UAE, and so on, that could be a major aspect of the deal. India is doing a lot with regards to renewable energy. And honestly, the organizations can come in. They have businesses from India here. China, which is still the major supplier of generating sets to Nigeria, is doing massively. When it comes to renewable energy, they have some of the biggest plants in the world. And they are handling a lot of construction work here in Nigeria. So that could be part of the deal. And then we could see, for instance, the same way we do, I don't know, this is not my core area, we might need to get someone else to talk about it, but the same way you do deals where certain things are swapped for certain things, it's the same way we could swap technology. Since we are lacking in the technology, we could swap the technology. China brings in the technology, for instance, and we give them something else. And that way, without even paying for this technology, without physically paying for it, we use whatever we have that we can give to bring in this technology. But like I said, it just has to be a deliberate action from government.
Okay.
So when it comes to trading energy, no, it is something that I think is a special area we really need to look into and see how it works, because the technology to do it is already existing.
So what I hear you say is use what you have to get what you want, right? Well, thank you so much, Leonard, energy experts, for joining us. We also had Dr. Idahosa earlier on, who has been a part of this conversation, and we've been taking a look at energy diversification, and we also took a look at energy generation, transmission, and eventually distribution. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we will take a look at energy transition challenges. Stay with us.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Change is constant and transformation is an inevitable consequence. I will be speaking about a novel idea, achieving transmission with the Austin 5 Forces model. My name is Austin Okerins. I mentor business leaders and entrepreneurs to scale their businesses in order to optimize the jobs they create so that we can have shared prosperity. And this is the 30th anniversary of the company which I founded, CWG PLC. It is the largest security listed in the technology sector of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. I've been an entrepreneur in residence at the Columbia Business School, New York, and on the Global Agenda Council of the World Economic Forum. I'm currently on the advisory board of the Global Business School Network and a member of the Business Practices Council of the AACSB. Driven by shared prosperity and a sustainable world, I now run the Oslo Leadership Academy. I would like to share my idea on 5 forces for achieving transformation. New beginnings bring about opportunities for transformation and reinvention. I've codified the relationship between transformation, vision, team, time, resources, and resolve in a model which I call the Austin 5 Forces model for transformation. Each one of the great transformations that have come before, be it President Kennedy's inspirational vision to land a man on the moon, Lee Kuan Yew's crack team in economic transformation of Singapore, or the resolve of Thomas Edison in discovering the light bulb. Imagine a framework that could help people navigate transformation necessitated by change with confidence and a significantly higher chance of success, be it socio-political, economic, or business. TED is a well-respected global forum. I've benefited immensely from watching TED, so I feel a deep sense of responsibility in sharing this revolution in the spirit with which I've so freely received.
On Early Exchange, our responsibility is to serve you the best. And so we keep giving you the best as we've been talking about the energy market. Earlier, we had a conversation in respect to energy diversification. And we want to dovetail into what we should do when it comes to energy transition. You know, there's been that development over the years because when it comes to the energy sector, things keep evolving over the years. And I'm being joined by Sam Huruwije, who is a specialist in that regard to talk about energy transition. Sam, glad to have you join us.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Femi. Good morning, Vivian.
Good morning,
My
Sam.
pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much
Welcome.
indeed for having me.
Thank you.
So give us a background understanding into what energy transition is all about, what is playing out in the global space, and as far as Africa is concerned, for our audience to understand the concept of energy transition.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's move back a little. I'd like to put things into perspective. Energy transition what we call energy transformation, moving away from traditional use of energy from fossil fuel to see how we can move away to low carbon gas, which is called renewable energy. But what is key is that right from the Industrial Revolution, where we moved from firewood to steam engine to coal and all that. So this transitioning has always been there. But 2015, the Paris Agreement, because of the danger from high level carbon emission, an agreement was reached in Paris that we should move away from fossil fuel to renewable energy options, which are more sustainable in terms of how that's able to help mankind from the emissions that you have from the greenhouse layer that is being emitted from high carbon. So what is key is that government from the International Multilateral Organization has put in place certain policy that by the year 2030, then we should be able to move away from this high carbon to low carbon source of energy. So you have wind, you have solar, but as we progress the conversation, we'll be able to speak to specific issues. So transitioning is just moving to sustainable energy, which is renewable energy. So that's the trajectory that the world is going currently.
You know, you talked about using firewood in those days. It's no longer, it's still, I mean, people still use firewood.
Yes, it's there, but at the low level, firewoods were the driver of the Industrial Revolution. You moved to that point, you came into burning coal, then you move away to fossil fuel, that's oil and gas.
Yes.
But as we move, this source of energy has become danger to livelihood and the way we can live a better life. So if we don't move away from the traditional, which are high carbon driven energy gases, then we're likely to have a problem. So the transitioning, we have over 500 billion investment in renewable energy. On the other hand, you have over 1 trillion on the traditional fossil fuel energy over a period of time. So how do we gradually transit without hurting those people who are in those businesses? So it's going to be a gradual process.
Okay.
But then you have the concept of international politics. Even those who are policing the world that will move away to renewable energy, I see firing coal and all that.
Which is what I'm going to come to next. But when you say danger, you're talking about global warming, right?
Yes, please.
Which has become a major threat in this age. Now let's talk about global politics. Yes, like you said, in the case of energy transition. Energy transition, for starters, is gradual, like you said. It's ongoing. It's not something you can achieve in a very short term, right? So what has the global players, the major players in energy generation, how well have they played this politics?
Well, I would like to use a concept when you talk about international politics. That's what we call selective morality.
Okay.
Those who are the major players are making funds available, particularly to the global south. But some commitment that has been made from Paris Agreement in 2015, even to COP26, and even the recent Climate Summit that just ended last week in Kenya. Some of those promises to mitigate climate change, those funds are not really available. So on the one hand, they tell us that we must move away, but those investments are not even there. Even the policy regime, international policy regime, does not even support the investment that are coming to the global south, so that we can move away from the traditional energy regime to renewable energy, which is called sustainable energy, or a transformative energy regime, where we can move fully to wind, to solar energy generation, even hydro electric generation. So these are some of the challenges. So on the other hand, the global south must equally exploit their environment. Since we have plenty of sunshine, we have plenty of wind. How do we develop the policy framework? How do we improve on the policy framework so that even local organizations can take advantage of this other renewable source of energy that is in abundance, particularly in Africa, that is blessed with sunshine. Even during the rainy season, you see, you have plenty of sunshine. So those are the core issues. The international politics is there, but then for the Global South must have a call to action mechanism that can enhance that deliverable so that we can sustain energy in a way that will improve on our livelihood.
Talking about politics, you were making reference to international politics. I would love us to talk about the local politics here, you know, talking about the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. I would like you to talk to us if you think a country like Nigeria is ready for that transition, looking at our politics, looking at our policies, looking at the body language of the government, looking at the provisions that we have. Is Nigeria ready for this transition?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question, but I will just make an attempt. That's very tricky. Thank you, Femi. What I think is that we even have a challenge, even from the traditional source of energy. We're not able to even provide electricity. How many megawatts of electricity we're able to generate, even from the traditional means of energy? So therefore, I think since we even have challenge in that sector, more investment, more policy framework should be initiated so that we just move straight to alternative source of energy, which is renewable energy. We have sun in abundance. So policy on solar energy, wind, and even hydro electricity generation capacity must be improved upon. So on the one hand, in terms of investment, it's really capital intensive. Therefore, the government from the rural communities must scale up renewable energy so that we can quickly move into that regime. But it's a very challenging development. But then, policymakers must find a way to get to that level of commitment.
You know, I'd like us to talk about the level of contribution. You've been talking about the Global South. What's the level of contribution to global warming that, you know, you can put on the Global South versus what those in, you
Global
know,
North.
Yeah, are contributing?
In fact, don't even talk about the politics of it. Those who are policing the world for climate change are the heaviest polluter. Therefore, they've made commitments to us in the Global South. Those commitments are not coming quickly. But on the other hand, the Global South must equally be responsible enough that they are not the ones creating this emission that is affecting the ecosystem. Therefore, we should push the agenda of renewable energy. Why not waiting for those commitments from the Global North? So they are the heaviest polluter, there's no doubt about that. So what is key for the Global South is to have a call to action that will change the dynamics in terms of sustainable energy policy, the economics of it, the marketing of it, and how we can provide incentive for low carbon emission by paying people who are able to do green, particularly hydrogen green gas, so that we're able to sustain that growth in the industry. While the politics of the Global North remain there, then we must be encouraged, since we are not really the greatest polluter, to take advantage of our ecosystem so that we can push ahead.
Talking about emission affecting the ecosystem, as you've made reference to, there's this projection by the International Energy Agency. There's a report they released where they talked about the shift to electric vehicles. I want you to talk to us in this light. What impact will this make when there's this shift to electric vehicles? And what do you expect of a country like Nigeria to do in respect to this shift to electric vehicles?
There are about 2 or 3 companies that are already manufacturing electric cars in Nigeria. And I recall one of the business owners saying that since the new government came into being, with the pronouncement, they used to sell about 1 car in a month. Those are scaled up to 10 cars. So there's a new development in that sector. Again, the electric cars are low carbon emitting cars. So we need to encourage people to change their traditional combustive engine cars to electric cars. But again, the transitioning is a major challenge. You need to make investment, even if you are going to convert. Even though at the cost of conversion, it may look very high, but on a sustainable manner, it becomes cheaper. So the idea is that we must encourage people, a framework by the Ministry there was supposed to be a new ministry that deals with that, or a sub-ministry. I'm not too clear now, so I don't want to make clear statement on that. So to encourage the conversion into electric cars, so that we help to reduce carbon emission into the ecosystem, then we, on a sustainable manner, we have a good livelihood. So, but there's a lot of investment in that sector, but the government needs to provide some incentive so that people can move in that direction. So a deliberate policy must be sustained in that direction.
So I want us to take a general look at challenges confronting transition in the energy sector, not just as really, as it relates to cars alone, but on a general note. What are those challenges facing energy transition?
One is, first and foremost, the policy environment, policy framework is very essential. So we need to improve on the policy framework that sustain renewable energy. So more investment must be made. Rural communities, schools, universities must take advantage of policy framework in that direction. I do know for sure that that industry has been deregulated further. So the state is no longer on the exclusive list, is now on the concurrent list. So local government, states can invest in that sector. So that policy regime framework is already to support. Then 2, we must encourage massive investment in that sector. So when we are looking for foreign direct investment, we should also encourage people to come to invest in the renewable energy sector by giving them tax holidays, tax incentive, once they're able to come with wind energy opportunity, solar energy opportunity that drive their businesses, that we encourage. So investment, they must equally create and sustain the carbon market where people are able to trade on carbon and they get incentive. That we help to reduce the challenge that confront the energy market in Nigeria. Then on the last front, in my view, civil society organizations must constantly sustain the call to action that will move away from high carbon driven energy source to sustainable energy source. And one of the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, address energy critically. So renewable energy is the talk of the day, and we must sustain it so that we can overcome those challenges.
Talking about energy transition challenge, one of the challenges we also need to talk about is the issue of funding, because you have said that it's possible for state to go into this for local government, but let's look at what state governments needs to do with the dwindling revenue coming up now, and then with the realities that they have to live with, because renewable energy is also not easy to come by. You have to spend some money. How can federal government, let's even come back to local government and state government, overcome this challenge now that there's a law to empower states to generate energy? How can state governments and local government overcome this shortfall so that you have a situation that the issue of funding wouldn't be a problem?
I think on the one hand, when they say there's dwindling resources, I think the state government, local government has to be more creative in terms of how they generate revenue. And one of the actions that we're speaking to is energy. So money can come if they make some investment. So that's on the one hand. But then what is key is that once the government have that commitment and the drive to sustain that sector, then investments will come. And I talked about tax holiday and incentive that can drive investment into those states, into those local governments. So a PPP arrangement, even though people have challenge with public-private partnership, then what can sustain re-energy transition is a massive investment by local government, state government, and the federal government on private-public partnership so that they have some counterpart funding and bring private sector to initiate those development, then the money will come. And that can become additional source of revenue. Then the oil company that are operating in some of those ecosystems must equally be encouraged to find new investment in those areas so that we can move away from high carbon gas energy.
All right.
You know, we're talking about examples of renewable energy earlier on. We talked about solar energy, wind energy, and then
electric
there's
cars.
this, yeah, electric cars. How about hydroelectric, you know, facilities like the one that the federal government, the administration that had just left was planning on building? That's renewable energy.
Yes,
yeah. So
hydrogen green gas
absolutely.
is the source of, yes.
How about lithium-ion-based batteries?
Well, that's an investment within those sector, and we have a high deposit of lithium in Nigeria. So we must look for investments rather than exporting those raw materials to other clients for their own development. We must find a way to invest in those kind of industry to improve what we call circular economy, and that again we assist in terms of a kind of backward integration. The labor market will equally benefit from such investment. So it will be a win-win situation for every person.
Okay.
All right, let me put you on the spot now.
You're welcome.
Let me put you on the spot now. Let's assume you're in the same room with the new minister. We have a new minister on board, and you have President Tinubu. If you're in the same room with them, what will be your recommendations when it comes to energy transition in Nigeria? I'm putting you on the spot now, and I would like you to talk about what will be your recommendations to them as regards the energy transition in Nigeria.
First and foremost, I will request them to do a baseline study to look at the level of infrastructure, the challenges, and the opportunity. That's on the one hand. A study must be done so that they have data that will inform decision making. That's number one. Number two is to encourage a PP arrangement structure that will help to sustain the industry. So if government does not have much money, they should find an enabling environment where they can collaborate and partner with industry. The president just returned from India, and India is one of the world capital in terms of renewable energy development. So we can exploit some of those benefits from the shuttle diplomacy that he undertook recently. So key evidence-based data, then a PPP arrangement, then looking at foreign investors to bring investment to that sector, providing incentive that will sustain those investments so that we can create a market for them, and labor or employment is generated through that. So those are the three options that I will speak to. Evidence-based data is very critical for informed decision-making process.
I'm glad I had to put you on the spot and you didn't
You're welcome.
me. Kudos for that.
I mean, Sam is equal to the task.
That's
you know, so you don't mind being put on the spot again, do you?
No, I don't mind.
So Nigeria,
if it's tricky, I will.
Nigeria has an energy transition plan document. I don't know if you are aware of it. And under it, their plan is to bring out 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. and to drive economic growth. How realistic is this?
Well, that's a plan. So a plan drives you to success.
Absolutely.
So for the fact that we have a plan there, that's good. Therefore, how do we realize or bring that plan into reality? So what I think the government should come out with a specific strategic document, give us the milestones, what are the deliverables, what are the timeline. So for year one, how many people are we taking from that? Year two, year three, year four, maybe year five, or maybe at the end of the administration, these are the number of people that we have been able to provide employment using the energy transition document to enable productivity and prosperity for Nigerian citizens.
Prosperity for Nigerian citizens. What a way to wrap up this discussion. Sam, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this subject.
My pleasure always.
Thank you.
Vivian.
Yes.
It's been productive. We've been talking about energy sector.
Absolutely.
And we are hoping that as our president has continued on this light, he will maintain that pace, with the signing of the bill. And like Sam said, it's not just about plan, following it up with action.
Mm-hmm. I also want to say a big thank you to all our resource persons today who have done fantastically well. I think we took a holistic approach to the subject today. And of course, the conversation continues. You can go online and just, drop your comments and we'll eventually come back to your feedback. So it's a good place to land, if you will say so, right? So if you had fun with us today, why don't you join us again, same time, same station. Until then, have a very, very good day. I am Vivian Oguche.
And I am Femi Ayodele. Have a nice time.